I wasn't expecting war that morning. I just wanted coffee. It started like any normal Tuesday. The sun was barely stretching its arms across the horizon, and I stepped out into my front yard with my favorite mug, savoring the quiet. That golden moment where the world hasn't quite woken up yet. But instead of peace, I was met with swamp. My lawn squelched under my feet like a sponge. Puddles glistened in the morning light. The hose that lay coiled by the spigot looked wrong. The rubber was warm, not just from the sun. Used warm. I live alone. No roommates. No kids. No secret gardener elves sneaking around in the night. Just me. My house. And now, apparently, a self-watering yard. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, then checked the spigot, tightly turned off. But the water bill had already told me something wasn't right. It had doubled last month. I'd brushed it off as a clerical error, or maybe a leaky toilet. But now, with my socks soaked through and the hose looking freshly dragged, the pieces began to fall into place. Someone had been using my water, and they weren't even subtle about it. I spent the next few days watching like a hawk. I even scribbled notes like some wannabe detective. Monday, 9:17 a.m., damp patch near mailbox. Wednesday, hose slightly uncoiled. It was all circumstantial, until Saturday. I had just pulled into my driveway, grocery bags in hand, when I saw her. There she was. Margaret Holloway. New neighbor. Perfect lawns. Oversized sun hat. Clipboard queen of the cul-de-sac. The woman who had been barking orders at delivery drivers and reminding people about fence height ordinances like she was HOA royalty. And now, she was dragging my hose across my yard. Bold. Brazen. As if it were hers. She hooked it to a portable power washer and started cleaning her already immaculate front porch. Water hissed and danced off the tiles like we were in some pressure washing commercial. I sat frozen in my car, groceries forgotten. She looked up, noticed me, and waved. "Hope you don't mind," she chirped. "Just a quick rinse." She didn't wait for an answer, just turned her back and kept spraying like I was the crazy one. Inside, I dropped the bags, stood at the kitchen sink, and stared at the faucet like it had betrayed me. It wasn't just about water anymore. It was about audacity. That afternoon, I walked over and knocked on her door. Margaret answered with a smile so fake it nearly cracked. "Hey, Margaret," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I noticed you were using my hose earlier. Everything okay with your water line?" She laughed. "Oh, no. I just like your hose better. The pressure is amazing. Besides, we're all neighbors here, right? Community property." My jaw almost hit her porch tiles. "I'm pretty sure this isn't a commune," I said gently. "And that water, it's on my tab." Her smile didn't falter. "Well, I'm sure the HOA won't mind. Sharing is what makes us a community." Then she closed the door in my face. That was the end of the conversation. Or so she thought. Now, I'm not a confrontational guy. I don't yell, I don't storm around, I don't escalate, I solve. So, I emailed the HOA. Calmly, clearly, attached my water bill, included a polite request for clarification on whether community property extended to personal water spigots. Their response? "Thank you for your concern. At this time, we encourage all neighbors to resolve minor disputes amicably without HOA intervention. In other words, deal with it yourself." So I did. I bought a lock. A simple, sturdy hose bib lock. Margaret couldn't use what she couldn't access. Problem solved. Until the next morning. I stepped outside to admire my locked spigot, only to find it was gone. Not just unlocked, cut. The jagged edge of the lock glinted in the grass like a crime scene relic. Someone, Margaret, had used bolt cutters. Across the street she was back at it, spraying down her SUV like she was in a car wash commercial, water glistening on the chrome as if my rising utility bill was just background noise. This time, I walked up. Less friendly. "Margaret," I said, "did you cut the lock?" She glanced at me, unfazed. "Oh, that thing? It was a safety hazard. Someone could trip. I took care of it." She flipped her hair, returned to scrubbing her tires. I stood there, breath tight in my chest, the weight of disbelief pressing down like a storm cloud. This wasn't just about water. This was about control, about disrespect. and I wasn't going to let it slide. That afternoon, I drove to the hardware store and bought something else. A tiny, motion-activated security camera. I tucked it under the gutter near the spigot, hidden, waiting. If I couldn't stop her, maybe I could document her. And maybe, just maybe, I could show the HOA something so egregious, even they'd be forced to act. Or the internet would. Because if there's one thing people online love, it's watching an entitled thief caught in 4K. The next few days turned into a game of cat and mouse. Except in this version, the cat wore yoga pants and an oversized sun hat, and the mouse had a camera lens tucked under the eaves. Every morning, like clockwork, the sound of the spigot twisting open echoed through the yard. The hiss of pressurized water. The soft drag of the hose across my lawn. Margaret Holloway was relentless. My camera caught her in full glory, watering her plants, washing down her driveway, filling up a kiddie pool, and, my personal favorite, giving her Shih Tzu a spa-level bath. She didn't just steal water. She stole it with confidence. I uploaded the footage to a private neighborhood forum under the title, "Neighbor uses my water like she owns it, daily." The comments came fast. Some laughed. Others were furious. A few offered legal advice, and one guy even sent me a link to a motion-triggered sprinkler system that sprayed intruders. But the best part? Margaret saw it. The next morning, she wasn't smiling. No hat, no charm, just pure rage behind those aviator sunglasses. She marched across the street and pounded on my door like she was executing a search warrant. "You're violating my privacy," she snapped, "and creating a hostile environment." I stayed calm. "You're violating my property and creating a financial burden." She crossed her arms. "Do something about it. I dare you." Those 4 words changed everything. That wasn't a warning. That was a green light. You see, I wasn't interested in a shouting match. I didn't want drama. I wanted results. That night, I pulled out a notepad and started planning. No more locks. No more emails to the HOA. If they wouldn't act, I would. But revenge without precision is just noise. I needed to know how far she'd go. So the next morning, I took a sick day. I stayed inside, curtains drawn, coffee in hand, eyes glued to the security feed. At 10:34 a.m., right on cue, Margaret crept across the lawn. She didn't knock, didn't hesitate, just unhooked the hose like it was hers and dragged it across the grass. She wore her usual smug expression, but this time, I stepped outside. Phone in hand, pretending to text. She froze for a second, then smirked, and kept going. She actually waved the hose at me and said, "Still works great. You should thank me for keeping it in shape." I didn't reply, just recorded. The footage was perfect, clear, undeniable, time-stamped. But I already knew the HOA wouldn't do a damn thing. I needed something more poetic. Later that afternoon, I took a drive past a nearby construction site. That's when I saw it, a temporary industrial sewage tank, the kind they use for portable toilets and waste containment. And it hit me. A terrible, brilliant, terrible idea. I pulled over and struck up a conversation with one of the workers, told him I was a homeowner running a quirky irrigation experiment. He laughed. I slipped him a little cash. He shrugged. "As long as you don't mess with the pump, I don't care." That was all I needed. Back home, I got to work. I built an adapter that connected my spigot to a second hose, one that I buried behind the bushes and connected straight to the sewage tank. It was a closed-loop system, completely invisible unless you knew what to look for. To anyone walking by, the main hose looked untouched. But turn on the water, boom, instant sewage sprinkler. I tested it with a separate line and sealed bucket. The smell could have flattened a rhinoceros. I set the trap that night under the cover of darkness. The next morning, I didn't wait inside. I sat on my porch with a newspaper and coffee, pretending to be distracted while my camera rolled. At 10:31 a.m., Margaret struck again. She strutted across the lawn, hose in hand, and connected it to a fancy rotating sprinkler in the middle of her front yard. It spun like a halo of doom. Then she turned the spigot. At first, just a gurgle, then a sputter, then eruption. A jet of thick, brown, putrid sludge sprayed across her lawn, patio, and, merciful heavens, her white wicker furniture. She screamed. Neighbors peeked out their windows. One guy dropped his coffee. Another pulled out his phone and started filming. Margaret flailed through the yard, slipping and screaming, coated in a foul, unforgiving sludge. She wrestled with the sprinkler like it was attacking her. Her screams echoed across the cul-de-sac. I didn't move, just watched it unfold on my phone screen in real time. This wasn't just revenge. This was art. Later that day, still covered in dried sewage and humiliation, she stormed up to my porch. Hair frizzed. Shoes ruined. "You're going to pay for this," she shrieked. "I'm calling the HOA, the city, a lawyer." I smiled. "You told me to do something, so I did." She stared at me, trembling, then stomped away, muttering legal threats and curses like they were going to save her. But she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. That night I received a letter, printed, formal, in all caps. A legal-sounding complaint claiming I had committed biological assault, endangered a domestic animal, and orchestrated a public humiliation campaign. She even said her dog got sick from the smell. My footage showed the dog never even left the porch. For a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. But the letter confirmed one thing. Margaret wasn't going to stop, and neither was I. Because now it wasn't just about water. Now it was about boundaries. And Margaret Holloway had just learned that mine came with consequences. I didn't post the sewage footage. At least, not at first. I wanted to savor the moment, to let the memory live in my head rent-free for just a little while longer. Margaret Holloway, soaked in stink, flailing through her perfectly manicured lawn like a villain in a B-grade comedy, screaming at the sky like justice had finally found its voice. But poetic moments like that, they don't stay private for long. Because someone else did post it. One of the neighbors who filmed it from across the street. They uploaded it to Reddit under the title, entitled "Karen Gets a Taste of Dirty Justice," literally. It exploded. Within hours it had thousands of upvotes. Then TikTok. Then YouTube. Memes sprouted like weeds. Someone slowed down the footage and set it to opera music. Margaret's scream echoing with dramatic strings in the background. Another user did a Marvel-style trailer titled "The Hose Avenger, Rise of the Water Warrior." And the internet, as it always does, went to work. Strangers from across the country were commenting, tagging friends, sharing their own HOA horror stories. My mailbox? Overflowing with baked goods, thank you notes, and one mysterious gold-colored hose nozzle. No name, no message. Just a symbol. I'd become a symbol. But Margaret? She became a warning. The following day she didn't come outside. Her blinds were drawn, car untouched, porch silent. But the silence didn't last. At noon, 2 members of the HOA board arrived at her house, clipboards in hand. I watched from my window as Margaret dramatically gestured toward my home, pointing and pacing like she was conducting a courtroom drama. I could almost hear her voice carrying through the cul-de-sac. A few hours later, I got a letter. This one was official, a real fine. $600 for violating community health protocols and creating a hazardous environment for a fellow resident. I nearly choked on my iced tea. Not only had the HOA ignored everything Margaret had done, but now they were punishing me for defending my own property. I called the HOA office immediately, got bounced between board members like a ping-pong ball. Finally, one of them admitted Margaret had submitted photographic evidence and statements from 2 supposed witnesses, claiming I had engineered a chemical attack. I offered to provide camera footage, timestamps, documents from the construction site, and clear proof that no one but me had touched the hose system. They told me the board would review it at the next scheduled meeting, in 4 weeks. 4 weeks. Margaret knew how the system worked. She was exploiting the bureaucracy, slow response times, and apathy. She wasn't just fighting me anymore, she was fighting dirty. But she made one mistake. She thought I'd give up. So I went deeper. Over the next few days, I dug through public records, the HOA bylaws, even visited the county clerk's office. I wasn't obsessed. I was focused. And then I found it. Buried in Section 4.2b of the HOA Charter. Any homeowner found trespassing on another resident's property, particularly for unauthorized use of utilities, shall be subject to immediate investigation, financial penalties, and possible removal of HOA privileges. Bingo. I printed every photo, timestamp, video clip, and cross-referenced it with my water bills and surveillance logs. I even included quotes from neighbors who had submitted complaints about her in the past. The file was thick, ironclad. I didn't just send it to the board. I sent it to the entire street. Within 2 days, things shifted. One by one, neighbors knocked on my door. Glenn Parker, the hammock guy, was first. "I've had it with her," he said. "She reported my backyard for being too colorful. A hammock, Ethan." Then came the couple from the corner house. Then the single mom across the road. Story after story. Margaret had left a trail of passive-aggressive destruction for months. All I'd done was strike the match. They lit the fire. Someone even leaked audio from a private HOA meeting, where Margaret could be heard yelling about being targeted by jealous neighbors who couldn't handle a strong woman. Her voice, sharp and smug, sliced through the clip like a dagger. Now paired with the sewage sprinkler video, it was a PR disaster. She didn't leave her house for days, but I knew it wasn't over. People like Margaret don't back down. They retreat, regroup, plot. And sure enough, on a windy Thursday afternoon, she returned, with backup. She knocked on my door, flanked by the same 2 HOA board members from earlier. One held a clipboard, the other, a thick folder. Margaret stood tall, dressed like she was about to star in Law and Order, Suburban Victims Unit. "We're here to discuss the escalating dispute and a potential biohazard incident," clipboard guy began. I nodded. "Would you like to come inside?" Margaret recoiled. "I don't feel safe in your home," she snapped. Of course not. They handed me a new complaint, 3 pages long, filled with Margaret's usual exaggerations. Weaponized sewage, environmental terrorism, orchestrated character assassination. She even claimed the stench had seeped into her foundation, and that her emotional state was fragile due to public shaming. I let them speak. I didn't interrupt. When they were done, I calmly excused myself, went inside, and returned with a folder of my own. Inside, every frame of surveillance footage, multiple dates. Margaret trespassing, using my hose. Always without permission. I included HOA Bylaw 4.2b, highlighted. The board members flipped through the packet slowly. Margaret's face paled with every page. She started to talk, something about doctored footage, defamation, a hostile environment. But this time, they didn't listen. They told her they would call a special meeting within the week. She demanded immediate action. They said, "We've already seen plenty of action." She turned to me, quieter now. Her voice was almost shaking. "I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." I smiled. They already do. That night, I posted a calm, factual summary to the neighborhood forum. No jokes, no memes, just the timeline, the footage, the evidence. The comments flooded in. Support, laughter, solidarity. One neighbor offered to mow my lawn for free. Another left a pie at my door with a note. "You're a legend." And I finally exhaled. I'd won a battle. But the war? Not quite over yet. The special HOA meeting wasn't public, but news travels fast when an entire neighborhood is watching. Word spread like wildfire. Margaret was finally being held accountable. She arrived in full theater mode, pressed suit, binder of documents, jaw clenched like she was preparing to sue a courtroom into silence. But her usual charm didn't land. The room was colder now. The board, once her silent allies, sat stiff, guarded, and, most importantly, embarrassed. Because the evidence spoke louder than her voice ever could. Every clip, every log, every bill, it all pointed to one undeniable truth. Margaret Holloway had trespassed, manipulated, lied, and drenched herself in karma, literally. By the end of the meeting, the HOA issued her an official citation. $500 fine, multiple trespassing violations, warning of HOA privilege suspension if the behavior continued. They didn't apologize to me. Not outright. But I saw it in their eyes, the way they couldn't meet mine, the way they rushed through the final statements. Margaret had gone from queen of the cul-de-sac to liability. No one wanted to defend her anymore. Even her little fan club, Neighbors who used to wave as she patrolled the street vanished. One of the board members, the same guy who once backed her complaints, resigned quietly the following week. But Margaret? She wasn't ready to let go. She tried one last move, a final lunge before the curtain dropped. A complaint filed with the city, accusing me of illegal sewage line installation. Said I had connected my hose to hazardous waste and created an environmental risk. I got a visit from a city inspector. He looked serious until he saw the setup. After 5 minutes of laughing and double-checking the completely removable hose rig, he shook his head and said, "You're clean. Smart, actually. Creative." Then he added, off the record, "I wish more people stood up to HOA nonsense like this." I offered him bottled water. He grinned. "Only if it's not from the hose." By now the story had gone beyond our block. 4 million views and counting. Strangers from Australia to Ohio were sending me messages. "You're the hero we didn't know we needed." Someone even emailed asking if I'd consider printing t-shirts with the phrase, HOA Justice Flows. And yet despite the viral fame, the real win wasn't online. It was what happened in the days after. Margaret's house, once the epicenter of judgment and gossip, fell eerily silent. Curtains stayed drawn, porch light off. The flamingo statue she loved? Gone. Replaced by a simple for sale sign. She didn't tell anyone she was moving. No farewell party. No last-minute apologies. Just vanished. The day the moving truck showed up, I watched from across the street as workers packed up her world. Her outdoor furniture, the pressure washer, even the potted rosemary she used to boast about. She didn't make eye contact, didn't say a word. She just got into the passenger seat of an SUV and disappeared like a bad dream, finally waking up. Her house sold fast. A young couple with a toddler moved in. The first thing they did, brought over cookies and asked if it was okay to use their own hose hookup. I nearly cried. The neighborhood changed almost overnight. The tension lifted. People weren't just nodding anymore. They were stopping to talk, laugh, share stories. Glenn, the hammock guy, invited me to a backyard BBQ. Someone anonymously left a gold-plated hose nozzle on my doorstep. No note, just a quiet salute. And the best part? Peace. No more stolen water. No more HOA warnings. No more being made to feel like a trespasser on my own property. Just normal. But the story didn't end there. A week later, I received an email. Subject line: "She's here." The sender was Devin Ross, a homeowner in a different HOA community across town. Somehow, unbelievably, Margaret had resurfaced. Devin had watched the viral videos, recognized her instantly when she started filing complaints about wind chimes, barking dogs, and even the color of someone's tulips. But what tipped him off? He caught her dragging a neighbor's hose across the lawn. I replied immediately. Sent him the full camera setup guide. The valve switch system. Even a document I had jokingly named Karen Defense Protocol. His reply? "This means war." I didn't hear back for a few days. Then a message came through. A new video. It wasn't as polished as mine, shot from a phone at a slight tilt. But it captured everything. Margaret in her usual uniform, hose in hand, turning on what she thought was regular water. Only this time? Devin had taken it a step further, a mix of compost tea and expired fertilizer, non-toxic, all natural, but outrageously foul. Margaret shrieked, slipped, and fell into her own rose bushes, in front of a group of neighborhood kids riding scooters. The video gained traction instantly. Karen's Revenge, Part 2. I watched it 3 times, then started something new. A blog. Not to gloat, but to educate. To create a space for people tired of being bullied in their own homes. I called it Suburban Stand. I told my story, shared footage, invited anonymous submissions from others. It blew up. People rallied, shared, laughed, learned. I started adding merch, funny slogans, animated clips. One shirt read, "HOA means hell on arrival." Another had a picture of a hose with the tagline, "Know your pressure points." But my favorite moment came quietly. One sunny afternoon, I was in the backyard trimming hedges when I heard something. A sound I hadn't heard in months. Laughter. Real, carefree laughter. The new couple's toddler was running through a sprinkler on their lawn. set up with their own hose, spinning in wild circles. The parents chased after her, squealing in delight. No stolen water, no fines, no judgment. Just joy. That was the real win. Not the viral views, not the notoriety, not even the golden nozzle on my shelf. It was knowing that, after all the madness, the neighborhood was whole again. That people had learned to draw lines and defend them. And that sometimes all it takes is one hose to wash away a tyrant. I never thought a garden hose would change my life. And yet, standing there in the quiet of my backyard, no shouting neighbors, no fines in the mailbox, no swampy lawn underfoot. It was hard to believe just how far things had spiraled. What started as a few stolen drops had turned into a flood of confrontation, justice, and unexpected unity. Looking back, it wasn't really about water. It was about boundaries. The kind you draw with fences and property lines, sure. But more than that, the kind you carry inside. Your self-respect, your sense of fairness, your refusal to be trampled by someone else's entitlement. Margaret Holloway didn't just invade my yard. She invaded my peace, my dignity, my space. And in doing so, she lit a match I didn't know I was holding. For weeks, I played by the rules. I was polite, I documented, I reported, I asked for help. But when the system turned its back, I realized something. Sometimes, justice doesn't come from authority. It comes from creativity, from community, from courage. The truth is, we all have our own version of Margaret. Maybe it's a coworker who takes credit for your work. Maybe it's a family member who crosses lines because they mean well. Maybe it's an HOA president, a boss, a stranger online. Someone who thinks the world is theirs to manage, control, or correct. But when we allow people like that to go unchecked, something bigger is lost. Not just privacy, not just money. We lose our voice. This story, ridiculous as it may seem, hoses and sprinklers and compost chaos, was never just about getting even. It was about getting clear. Clear about what I was willing to tolerate. Clear about what I stood for. Clear about the kind of community I wanted to live in. And the kind I didn't. Because when neighbors stood up with me, when they shared their stories, when they chose solidarity over silence, that's when things truly changed. No more whispering behind curtains. No more swallowing frustration. Just people, finally, reclaiming their space. And the wildest part? It wasn't revenge that created that. It was truth. Unedited footage. Unfiltered words. Unshakable facts. The raw honesty of a neighborhood tired of being walked on. And yeah, okay, a little bit of sewage didn't hurt. But if you strip away the humor, the drama, the viral memes, what you're left with is something deeply human. The need to be seen, to be respected, and to feel safe in your own home. That's something we all deserve. Whether we live in a mansion or a studio apartment, whether we're renters or owners, whether our hose is gold-plated or barely trickling. And the lesson? Boundaries matter. Not just physical ones, but emotional ones, social ones. The kind you draw when you say, "This is mine," and you don't get to violate it just because you think you can. There's power in those words. There's power in standing firm, even when others laugh. There's power in speaking up, even when the rules weren't made to protect you. And sometimes when the noise dies down and the screen goes dark, there's a quiet kind of victory. A clean lawn, an untouched hose, a child's laughter echoing through the street like a reminder of what peace feels like. So yes, this story had chaos. It had conflict. It had Karen. But it also had growth. It had clarity. It had courage. And if even one person somewhere feels a little braver today, feels a little more seen, a little more willing to push back when someone steps too far, then all of it was worth it. Because this wasn't just a battle over water. It was a battle for balance, for fairness, for respect. And in a world where those things often feel like luxuries, maybe it's time we start treating them like essentials. So let me ask you something. What are the boundaries in your life that need defending? Not with anger, not with revenge, but with conviction, with creativity, with truth. Because you don't need a camera, or a hose, or 4 million views to make a difference. You just need the courage to say, enough. And maybe, just maybe, that's how change really starts. If this story moved you, inspired you, or just made you laugh a little, leave a comment below. Hit that like button. Share your own Karen moment or boundary-crossing tale. And don't forget to subscribe and follow the Story Forge for more tales that blend drama, emotion, and real-life lessons. Because around here, stories aren't just told, they're forged. See you in the next one.